Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you very much for joining us for this conversation on the European Union's relations with South Asia. I'm Shada Islam. I'm Senior Policy Advisor at the European Policy Center, and we're delighted to be holding this discussion with our partners, the Asian Institute of Diplomacy and International Affairs in Kathmandu. Now, you may wonder why we're talking about South Asia at this time. It's a simple reason for doing so, but also a very ambitious one. The simple reason is simple. 2 billion people, almost 2 billion people in South Asia. So the future and the welfare of these population is very important for the world for geopolitical and geo-economic reasons. Also, the European Union here in Brussels has good and very solid relations, trade, development, and political relations with all 8 countries which comprise the geographical entity known as South Asia. But this is bilateral, and I think we all agree that if it was collective and if we could work together region to region, perhaps the EU's policies would be more effective and more efficient. The ambitious reason is also that we're not naive. We know that there are political and economic differences, and that is political obstacles to this conversation about South Asia regional cooperation. There hasn't been a meeting, a summit of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, since 2014. There was some spark of hope. There was a video conference on the pandemic that was held in March last year. The Pakistani Prime Minister did not attend, but all the other leaders were there, and there was an agreement on an emergency fund for COVID-19. But also at the moment, the world over really, everyone's talking about developing strategies for the Indo-Pacific. The European Union is also scheduled to do so and is actually drafting its ideas at the moment. And I think it's very important that South Asia, even though we're talking about China and Russia and India mostly, that South Asia as a region is not forgotten when we look at the Indo-Pacific. The region, of course, we all know is marked by a lack of connectivity. Trade relations are ad hoc and really fragmented. There's hardly any connectivity. And of course, this makes it very difficult to deal with questions like the pandemic, like climate change, like education, and also building trade and investment links with an entity like the European Union. So that's why we're here. And I brought together, with Sunil at the Kathmandu-based Asian Institute for Diplomacy and International Affairs, we brought together 4 very eminent experts on this region. Let me introduce you to them very, very briefly. Madame Mashfee Shams is Joint Secretary East at the Bangladesh Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Dhaka. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us. She was formerly Bangladesh Ambassador to Nepal and was in constant contact with the SAARC Secretariat there. And so we think it would be quite interesting to hear your views, Mashfee. Thank you very much for joining us. From the External Action Service in Brussels, European External Action Service, I have to say, Ioannis Giogkarakis, I pronounced that well, I think, Head of Division, Regional Affairs in South Asia at the EEAS. From the College of Europe, the campus in Natolin, where I'm also visiting professor, thanks to Pascaline Winand. She's Director of Studies there, a colleague that I respect and admire greatly. And last but not least, Sunil KC, Chief Executive of the Asian Institute of Diplomacy and International Affairs. Now, the rules of engagement are very simple. I'm going to ask a couple of questions to our panel, and then I'm going to open the floor to Q&A from yourselves. There is a Q&A box, at the bottom of your screens. Please raise your hand, put your question there, and I will give you the floor with the help of my colleagues, Natalie, Clara, and Ivano Di Carlo. So without further ado, I'm going to put the first question to you, Mashfee. And speaking earlier today at the roundtable we had, the expert roundtable we had, you talked about South Asia as a region that must grow together, you said. And you said also that the major obstacle was not just political and economic, but also differences in mindsets about how to move forward. So my question to you is, can you explain this a little bit more? And how do we overcome these obstacles, if you like? Floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in the second round again. You see, it's not South Asian region as a whole. Initially, I mean, before the colonial era, we used to be part of one small principalities, kingdoms. We were all part of one big overall South Asian identity. But during the colonial era, some of these integrations and connections got disrupted. And after the partition, these lines hardened when the borders and the boundaries were drawn. You know, the India was partitioned, and Pakistan and Bangladesh, we all emerged as countries, and we had very strong identities, national identities. And it's very hard for us to let go of these identities and then reintegrate. And sometimes we have conflicting interests also. One of the best ways that I can think of, but you know, even then after that, there is hope, because we, even in the 80s, we managed to think of SAARC. It's a regional organization where all our leaders decided that we could work together and that we needed to work together. And that's why SAARC was created. And beyond SAARC, we also have entities like the BBIN and the Binte. So the need to, and the idea of working together is very much there. How we can move forward is by encouraging more people-to-people contact, more encouraging more think tanks like yours to work together, by encouraging more engagement between the political leaders, and of course, getting the physical connectivity in place. And as I was saying before, our physical infrastructure is sometimes we develop it with, you know, thinking only of our internal needs. If we could harmonize that and we could keep it as a building blocks, then it could help us to harmonize the entire regional infrastructure for greater connectivity. And I think that's where the EU could play a very important role, because EU, as you say, has very good relationship, bilateral relationship with all the countries. EU is also a very old partner, dialogue partner in observer in SAARC. I think if EU could harmonize its activities, its bilateral activities with the countries, and you know, make it more of a region, take a more regional perspective so that there's no duplication or conflict, I think that could greatly help us to move ahead.
Ambassador, if I could just have a quick follow-up. You talked earlier as well, because we had an experts roundtable just for those who were not present, and we spoke our minds. And if I could just bring forward one of the ideas that you brought to the table, which I found very interesting, is about coastal connectivity and coastal cities connectivity. And I was just wondering if you could just further elaborate on that.
Okay. You see, the ports like Chittagong in Bangladesh, Chittagong Mongla in Bangladesh, and then Kolkata, Visakhapatnam, and in Sri Lanka there's Colombo and Kandy, and then there's Maldives. So there are, you know, like dots of ports are there, but you know, these the waters are very shallow. For ports like Chittagong, Mongla, Kolkata, we need to transfer to from a feeder vessel, we need to transfer to a mother vessel so that it can go for the ocean going transportation. Unfortunately, because there's no direct linkage between Chittagong and Colombo port, for trade to take place between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, we have to take it all the way up to Singapore and then bring it back to Colombo, which really adds to the cost. So if we could have smaller vessels which would be, you know, fit and suitable for the shallow waters, and they would not need to be so big, and they would be much cheaper for transportation, I think that would really enhance our regional trade. It would also improve our, you know, overall concept of connectivity. And this would really, I think, because again, going back to the colonial era, because in the British times, the entire Bay of Bengal was one network of shipping linkages. So we could revive those shipping linkages and connect from like Visakhapatnam all the way to Indonesia, or Chittagong to, you know, Malaysia or Thailand and Colombo.
Right. Thank you very much. So in a way, going back to the future, Ambassador, I'm going to ask you one more question because I know you have to leave. Friends, Ambassador's taken time out of a very busy schedule, and I know you have to leave. So one more question. One of the questions that has become, let's say, very, very important worldwide, but also for the region, especially for your country, is really the impact of climate change. And I was wondering if you could give us an idea of whether regional-wide collaboration with interaction with the European Union could be one way of managing, if you like, this challenge.
Yes, of course, it's one of our priorities because Bangladesh is going to be one of the most affected, due to climate change. They're predicting that almost 2 million people will be displaced because of rising sea levels in the coastal areas. But also increasingly, we are seeing, bigger and more devastating cyclones in the region, and also climate change effects of in the Himalayas. That's also affecting Bangladesh because the glaciers are receding and the glacial lakes are, there's a problem of the outburst of the glacial lakes. So whenever we talk of the impact of climate change, we always bring in the impact of climate change on Nepal and Bhutan, because 30% of the rivers that flow into Bangladesh come from Nepal. The water from Nepal goes to the Ganges, and from Ganges it comes into Bangladesh. So we are really dependent on the Himalayan rivers and this the entire mountainous range. So there has to be a regional approach. There has to be bigger support from the EU in this area. And Bangladesh is taking over the chairmanship of the Climate Vulnerable CVF, the Climate Vulnerable Forum, this year. And we hope together, Nepal is also part of Nepal, Maldives, and Bhutan are also members of that. So I think together we can really work in that area.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and good luck on all these issues, and let's keep up the conversation because this is going to be very important as we go forward. Thank you very much. Ioannis, to come back to you, the Ambassador's made good points about there being an ambition in South Asia, and SAARC is one manifestation of that ambition of actually working together. But then political realities get in the way. And she also made the point that you could, as a first step, as the European Union, start harmonizing bilateral relations as a first step towards bringing in a more regional dimension. Is the regional dimension in your minds at the External Action Service and elsewhere in the EU institutions when you look at this very fragmented and disconnected region, which is today's South Asia?
Thank you, Sandra. Actually, if I say it's not only in our mind, it's in our DNA. I think we can also act as a model of integration, deeper, not only economic integration, but also political integration. It's also true that in connection with our partnership with South Asia, indeed, we have a lot of, actually almost all countries, a number of cooperation and partnership agreements. And actually in India is also one of our strategic partners in Asia as well. It's true also, on the other hand, that very much progress has been made on the regional integration side, and also on the EU involvement of that, because for us it's mostly, we are eager actually to see this happening. We see the need. We also see the reasons. And there are a lot of, as I said, good, bad reasons for that. And I think it's a matter that we can really facilitate to be sorted out. But unless certain fundamentals are not sorted out, perhaps through examples, good examples, I think that the path is quite long. On the other hand, we had an opportunity. I see that a lot of initiatives were taken because of COVID, to try to revive SAARC, to revive also, there is also a need, and I think the COVID has also a wider impact of displaying the need for international partnerships, for all more multilateral approaches, for working together. And it remains to be seen whether this impact will be long lasting or will concentrate only on the health sector. So that's something that remains to be seen. I would also say that what your question is also very relevant, also in connection with the planning of our future cooperation with the entire world, actually, because we are now in the final stage of formulating our partnership assistance, I would call it. It's not only development assistance any longer, it's partnership to try to develop in the next 7 years with all countries. And this is exactly the question that we face now in connection with South Asia. We tend to have a more geographic, that means we have to work more and more with partners rather than, and try to incorporate all horizontal issues in geographic programs, be it regional or national. We also have to have more political focus. We also appreciate that after so many years of cooperation, our support, the financial assistance, is of somehow relative diminishing importance, but the needs are there also because of the success. And unfortunately, the infrastructure does not accompany the growth, cannot support the economy. And we have to talk more and more about investment. And in fact, this is what is actually the motto of the new approach: is we invest on a better world. And of course, we have to support investments because we know that whatever we provide is not sufficient. We need really to support the real economy, private sector. And along this context, we are eager to see how we can really create a certain paradigms. Perhaps by us starting a bit modestly, the needs are there, also connectivity is there. We talk about strategies. It was in 2018, we have developed 2 strategies for Asia. One is connectivity, others for security. And we now also we started reflecting on the new Indo-Pacific outlook approach. It's very relevant there for this discussion. And I will say that I'm mostly on the listening mode, because all these ideas have to fit into what we're going to do also and plan to do this year and beyond. And I look forward to this discussion. So I will stop here for the time being, and I'm really very keen to listen to others and also entertain certain questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ioannis, for that introduction. And let's say your hopes of playing a bigger role, but also, of course, the realities on the ground that make that sometimes a little bit more of a challenge. And as you said, you've had a connectivity strategy, a security strategy, and now the Indo-Pacific outlook. And I guess the question I would put to you, Pascaline, if I may, Professor Winand, bring you in. You've heard what Ambassador Mashfee has said and Ioannis have said about, the aspiration in many countries in the region of working together, but also the realities on the ground, the political differences, let's say the fragmentation. Cross-border cooperation is the challenge. A lot of informal cross-border cooperation does take place, but that is very ad hoc and very sporadic. From your point of view, do you see South Asia getting its, let's say, the kind of attention that it should be getting from the European Union and others, or is it being distracted? Is the EU distracted by the great power constellation that we see around us? So United States, China, India, Russia, and South Asia somehow gets sidelined in this conversations and these strategies. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. You know that I've been doing a lot of interviews about the relation between India and the EU. And indeed, one of the frustrations that comes to the fore is always that the EU is giving more attention to China. So there's frustration on that side. Another frustration, if you talk about the big powers, is that the EU somehow does not have its own strategy that's very, very separate from that of the US. So there is a regret on the part of some partners in the region that, and I put it very plainly here, that sometimes the EU acts as the poodle of the United States. Now, of course, this may change between different American administrations, and there's been recently, I think, more of a coming together of India with the European Union in addressing both the challenges of China and also perhaps the less engagement of the US in the region. But that might all change, of course, with the Biden administration. So I don't know if you want me to elaborate.
Yes, a little bit more on how South Asia feels, as you said, the frustration in India, but we're talking about the wider region. Do you think there's a similar kind of feeling that China gets too much attention, or ASEAN even, where we've recently signed a strategic or concluded a strategic partnership? And you could argue that South Asia itself is very fragmented. So, you know, the European Union has no option, as Ioannis said, but to engage on a bilateral level. How do you see this going forward?
Well, what I see is that you certainly have several regional arrangements in Asia, the Asia-Pacific, the Indo-Pacific, and some, of course, with overlapping memberships. And I think one of the problems is that you have divisions and hesitations among Asian countries on the scope, membership, and purpose of regional cooperation in South Asia and more broadly Asia. And there are different attitudes of key countries in Asia and in Europe towards these organizations, and even in the terms being used to describe the region. So on the Indo-Pacific or the Asia-Pacific, you know, if you look at the ASEAN attitude, there would be a big focus of to have ASEAN as the center of this. If you look at the EU right now, I saw that Josep Borrell in November last year spoke of the Asia-Pacific as our economic neighborhood. And then he mentioned in the same, during the same communication that the Indo-Pacific region was of strategic importance to us. And it's clear that the Indo-Pacific will be the most dynamic region in the world and the center of growth for decades to come. So, and you know, I think individual countries also within the EU have their own take on what it means, you know, the Indo-Pacific. Also, what I think we shouldn't forget is that these organizations have sought inspiration in developing themselves from their own region, but also by interacting with other regional organizations and international organizations in Asia, in Europe, and elsewhere. So we should remember, be a little bit modest here, that the EU is certainly not the only game in town. We should try and see, if we look at the interaction of the EU with organizations in South Asia, what we can learn from this interaction. And earlier, I think today at the roundtable, we're talking about whether the EU should prioritize some of these regional organizations. I think we should learn from the history of what we've already done, you know, with these regional organizations. And certainly when you were asking me about ASEAN, SAARC, and so on, certainly what we can see is that at first the EU gave definitely more attention to ASEAN than to SAARC. And there are many reasons for this. Some originate in SAARC itself, with India at first not really wanted to have any interference of external powers in SAARC, including via foreign aid, whereas some of the other members of SAARC, where the smaller countries were quite interested in getting funding, you know, from external partners like the EU. Then finally, when you decide to actually really accept, you know, such funding, it is on equal terms and without conditionalities. And I think I looked at, you know, the kind of history of what worked and what didn't work in interacting with SAARC in the past. And I think there is also, it's not just about SAARC, you know, not getting its acts together, not being coordinated properly with all the divisions and so on and so on. It's also about the EU. And I think in proposing certain initiatives, that there's been on the part of the EU, some lack of understanding the local context, on trying to involve local actors in designing some of the projects. So they're not just already made and here you go, you have to accept it and that's it. So I think that's something we could learn from the future to understand the local conditions a little bit better. I think then to build a project, but in partnership with these actors. I could also talk about ASEM. I think the EU support the inclusion of South Asian countries in ASEM from the beginning, but then we had the problem with Southeast Asian countries being opposed to this. Why? Because they said, well, you know, we have all this conflict in South Asia. Do you really want to bring them in? And also South Asia is not growing as fast, you know, as we are. So do we really want to bring them in? And then there were also these problems surrounding whether how ASEAN handled the situation in Myanmar and the human rights situation. So in the end, in fact, this became a problem for India because, enlargement seemed to be predicated on solving the Myanmar problem and on different perceptions between different conceptions between the EU and ASEAN on human rights.
On human rights. Yeah.
And then in the end, in Jadros, but only in 2006, So you have all of these differences between different perceptions impacting our potential partnerships, I would say, with South Asia.
Right.
And then, okay, maybe I'll stop now. I have more to say.
No, but thank you very much. I mean, thank you very much. And you mentioned Myanmar, and of course, that is once again a hot potato in our hands and will impact not only on Southeast Asia, but on neighboring Bangladesh and, of course, the countries of South Asia as well. No, we'll come back to some of the very valid points you've made about understanding local conditions, but also the layers of regional organizations that exist. For instance, it's just a thought in my mind. SAARC has diminished influence and, if you like, attraction, but the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, India is there, Pakistan is there as well, so is Iran and Afghanistan. So it's quite interesting that some of the countries in South Asia, Ioannis, are paying more attention to the SCO, see it as perhaps more geopolitical and geostrategic than SAARC itself. Which brings me to Sunil. Sunil, would you be able to turn your video on so we can see you as well as hear you? Is this a possibility? And while I turn to Sunil and ask for his comments and intervention, may I ask all the participants who are listening to us and watching us to start sending in some questions and some commentary that I'll be happy to put to our panelists and say we'll respond to you. So I'm looking forward to getting your questions on the Q&A box here on the screen. And Sunil, you've been listening to what Ioannis and Pascaline have said, and you were very eager for us to work together on this South Asian dimension. So please, let's hear your comments.
Yeah, hi, Shada. Yeah, I think, if we talk about, South Asia and EU, what I focus is that, currently, the India has not much more interest into the SAARC revitalization, basically, even if we initiated, to bring some of the...
Sorry, frozen. Sunil is frozen at the moment. I think
SAARC expert.
Sunil, you'll have to perhaps come in again because your technology, I think you're driving on the highway somewhere.
Yeah, are you hearing me?
Yeah, now, yes, please.
Yeah, so, what I believe is as Nepal's biggest neighbor, India, they have quite focus into the BIMSTEC and BBIN, rather than SAARC association. So that what I would like to say is Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, other smaller countries, they are quite interested, to have the SAARC, the next conference, which is headed by the Pakistan. But due to India, somehow things are not happening because of India, Pakistan tensions might be India has shifted their focus to the sub-regional cooperation like BIMSTEC and BBIN. But if you talk about, the BBIN, that, there is a, motor vehicle agreement between Bangladesh, Bhutan, India and Nepal, but Bhutan somehow, not interested to be a part of the motor vehicle agreement till the day, and they have not rectified from their parliament yet. Even Nepal, even not rectified from the parliament regarding the motor vehicle agreement. That is, how, that shows that, the countries are quite interested much more into the bilateral level engagement. That is what I feel here in the country. But, but as a scholar, we feel that, there has been much more cooperation between South Asia and European Union. And there, if we see that there has been larger, bilateral engagement even from the European countries. Like if you see, Germany is one of the biggest development partner for Nepal among the SAARC, among the European Union here in Nepal. And we have the, EU delegation office in Kathmandu as well, representing and doing multiple projects, basically in the development sites. And I would like to stress my point that like South Asia, even especially the Nepal. With the European Union and with the EU countries, which have been lacking since many years, and Nepal has been quite, interested and focused to bring much more investment and have the trade engagement with the European Union, and that should be the next focus between EU and South Asia. Even the economic diplomacy cooperation could have the next startup between the SAARC and the European Union, because economy is another, the most important vehicle for our, better collaboration or the better engagements, and which will bring us much more closer in days to come. My points are much more into the economy. So I would like to say that EU and SAARC has to focus basically on the economic engagement and the trade engagement and other connectivity projects, which are much more needed in days to come. So this is how I would like to say, Shada. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Sunil. I'm going to ask you a couple other questions, because we tried, as you know, Sunil, we tried to get a representative from the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, to attend this panel, and it was very difficult to do so. Your Prime Minister has said that he wants to give fresh impetus to SAARC. Given all the impediments that you have talked about, are you in his confidence, or do you know what the Foreign Ministry in Nepal, currently president, of course, of the SAARC, presidency of the SAARC, do you have any idea of what is planned in terms of giving this fresh impetus? Because in many ways, the COVID-19, as we said earlier, has given a regional dimension to the question. There are certain, let's say, similarities in how Pakistan and India and Bangladesh have coped with the pandemic. The impact on health has been less devastating than initially anticipated. Of course, economies have been hit very hard. So how can we give this new, because SAARC, whether we like it or not, remains the prime regional organization in the region, the most comprehensive one, if you like.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that whether you like it or not, but SAARC is a very important organization for South Asia. And recently there was the foreign ministers levels meeting as well virtually, and there was COVID after the COVID-19, like India initiated the virtual dialogue even for the COVID-19 setup. And recently our Prime Minister has spoken very well that Nepal wants to have the the conference, our Foreign Minister and the Pakistani. But recently, if you see that Nepal has been facing the political crisis, just a month back that the Nepalese PM himself dissolved the parliament. Even the Nepal is having the crisis on its own constitution, which we promulgated 8 years back. So now the political crisis is happening, but our people and the government really wants, to have the SAARC conference that is going to be happening in Pakistan, and our foreign ministry and the foreign,
Sorry, we are having connectivity problems. Yes, Sunil, you were saying that next conference.
Yeah.
Do we have a
next conference should
tentative
happen
date?
In Pakistan.
Do we have a tentative date for that?
So what I feel is that somehow there has been the date. No, not yet, not finalized yet,
But this year?
No, date has not been finalized yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let me see if there are any further questions. Some of the key things that Ioannis we have talked about, and Pascaline, for you as well, is the issue, as Ambassador Mashfee said, of climate change, where the European Union's Green Deal, which is, could become a global, if you like, benchmark for what can be done. It will create a great deal of complications as well. Not all countries are ready to go down that route. And of course, there's also the question of the maybe a carbon tax that could be involved. So climate change is one area that has been identified as one that obviously affects South Asia across the region. The other one is connectivity, or rather lack of connectivity, and where the EU's strategy could become kind of another sort of benchmark for how to proceed further. So I was just wondering, Ioannis, if you could comment on those two areas where there seems to be a kind of consensus require priority attention.
Thank you. I think that's undeniable, actually. First of all, let me say to you that European Union, of course, is one of the leaders in the fight against climate change. We are very much aware about the difficulties we face and the need that we need to work globally and act globally. And despite what we do here in Europe, unless and until other partners and major polluters really work together, we cannot really have results that can really reverse the phenomenon. Of course, this is also linked to environment and biodiversity. These are somehow interrelated. And it's also for this reason also that this Green Deal was one of the major priorities of the new Commission since it was established last year. And this Green Deal does not apply only to the European Union. We see how we can really work together with other partners. And this is also because in a new 7 years plan to partner with all the world, we have set aside and we have a target of invest not less than 30% of the total amount to the fight against climate change. That is, I think, is policy numbers. We know also that yet this, as I said, is not going to be sufficient. We now work in every single country. Our delegations work intensively to identify priorities, and I'm very happy that based on preliminary assessment we have on the spectrum of the proposal that came forward, of course, green transition, renewable energy, and support on this transformation of the economy, because it's an economic issue, is very much in the key and in the core of all actions. This has to be done, of course, nationally, and we can also see how we can see it also from a regional perspective. So there is work in progress on that. But of course, we know that it's a question of the will of the partner countries. And of course, they have their own development plans. They have also to support the growth of the economy. We still have a lot of countries that endeavor to become upper middle countries in the next few years, despite the temporary problem caused by COVID. We know it to be overcome sooner or later. And therefore, it's necessary really to partner and make sure that this growth we expect to explode perhaps in the years to come is going to be sustainable. And this is actually where the focus goes. As I said, it's something that we still work, and I'm sure that perhaps we can exceed, particularly in Asia, this 30%. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ioannis. So there's a question from Rosina Spinoy, and I think, Natalie, if you could give her the floor. She has a question on connectivity that I think both Ioannis, you, Pascaline, and of course also Sunil would be, I think, well placed to answer. So Natalie, can we go to Rosina, please? So she can ask a question herself. Rosina, floor is yours.
Sadly, her version of Zoom do not allow me to give her the floor. I'm very sorry.
Can she take the floor herself?
No, she can't.
Okay, so let me read out her question. It was about yes, about connectivity, Ioannis. So it was about the outreach of the Belt and Road Initiative of China across the region. Also, of course, obviously in Pakistan as well, and about how we can. Is there an interest, she asked, from the European level to connect further with the Belt and Road Initiative and on connectivity issues with the region? So Ioannis first, and then I'll turn to Pascaline.
Yes, although let me clarify that although the connectivity strategy was adopted in 2018 only, the European Union was very active in connectivity for decades. It was just that we didn't do it in a very, I would say, strategic political angle, and we tried to group together all these elements into a new strategy. And I would like also to reiterate that this strategy was not developed as an anti-PRA. Certainly, it is true that the strategy encompasses, has a narrative that supports sustainability. It supports also viability of investments, and I'm talking about financial viability, which is also very important when you invest such amounts of money in developing economies that they need also to have sufficient flows to repay the investments. And also we support the very much needed area where we can really try to identify common norms and standards in order to be interconnected and communicate. I think there is also work to be done there globally. So what we have not done so far, and this is what we plan to do, is to accompany this this endeavor with certain, I would say, more visible projects through, and this is exactly what we have also put aside, an investment fund under the new regulation, which is going to support infrastructure investment. As I said, it's not really, we can never support such investments alone, and we should not, in reality, investments in principle should be really able to repay back. And also a test for that will be really the participation not only from financial institutions but also from the private sector. So this is what we have also expertise in house of the European Union. I think we have a know-how that we can really export and can provide this technical assistance, if I may say so. And of course, we are keen, and of course, we already cooperate also to a certain extent. We work with China to see how we can really work together. And of course, we are also members of the new bank that was, international bank was created. So what I want to say is that there is work in progress on that. And it's necessary also that we have to work in third countries as well, and with third countries. So this is what we try to do also with Japan. We have the first partnership. We are also very happy to say that there is a possibility to progress soon with the connectivity partnership with India, which is extremely important for the regional dimension. There is still a proposal that was tabled by India, and we have now to contemplate and come up with a joint partnership. I think the ingredients are there. I cannot say much more because we're still at the beginning, but these are also very positive developments, I would say, also in the light of the next financial perspective. I will stop here, I think, and I will leave the floor to Pascaline perhaps to complement. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Ioannis. Yes, absolutely. Very, very good points about how we can take perhaps the partnership with India on connectivity and with Japan could be stepping stones towards a broader regional dimension to it. Pascaline, so this is obviously a moment where the EU is in the midst of rethinking where we have the Biden administration, as you pointed out, in the US, which is obviously recalibrating some of Donald Trump's follies, if I may put it this way. But you also have the European Union, which is in the midst of rethinking many of its Asian policies, strategies. Indo-Pacific strategy or outlook is coming up, and they're thinking of these connectivity partnerships. Any ideas about how one can take this forward so that we don't, as we get into this great power geopolitics, forget, as Sunil was saying, that the smaller countries of South Asia are very much part of the Indo-Pacific? You have to unmute, or somebody has to unmute.
I am now unmute.
Yeah, there you go.
Good. Okay. I think when you talk about connectivity, I think I heard next part, I think from the External Action Service the other day, saying that it is actually in our DNA, connectivity, as the European Union. So it's part of who we are. We're all about connectivity, right? Now, when you talk about and I hope I'm addressing your question partly. When you talk about connectivity with India and when you talk about connectivity with China, I think what's been a problem for both India and the EU is, I would say, the encroachment, or what is perceived as the encroachment of China in what they also perceive as their respective neighborhoods. So that's been one of the problems. And I think very diplomatically, the EU is playing both sides. So it's trying to be friendly with India and also with China in here because of course, the strategic importance of the region for EU trade, for energy, and then the same, you know, for India here, for the whole stability of the region. If we don't have a stability in this region, certainly we will suffer economically. So, you know, but so we're trying to play both ways. About the small countries in the region, if you look at regional organizations in South Asia and the broader region, because I don't think we can really limit it to South Asia, you see that India uses SAARC, you know, or it's trying to use SAARC when it suits India, and then we use a subset of SAARC, you know, like the BBIN countries, when it tries to achieve, for example, an agreement on motor or railway transportation, right? It didn't completely work, but certainly it's trying to do that. It's also using BIMSTEC. So you remember that the first inauguration, you know, of Modi, SAARC leaders were invited. The second one, it was BIMSTEC leaders, right? It's a very strong, strong message there. Of course, when you have a problem with Myanmar, that's going to affect the whole strategy of India there. But basically, what I think Modi has been saying is that we don't privilege any. We are using whatever suits us. I mean, I think I can even find you a quote there. So we're being very, very pragmatic. And what this means for the smaller countries, that you have to adapt to this. So for instance, Nepal is very much in favor of SAARC, you know, because it suits its own interests, and it has also special ties with China as well. As if you look at the issue of China within this organization, you will see, for example, that there's been a big debate on granting, you know, observer status to China, or even if China should become a member of SAARC. And that's pitting some countries against others, with some really very much wanting you know, a larger role for China, and India not wanting this at all, for example. So this is the richness and the complication of this region.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pascaline. Absolutely, the complexities that are there. Can I give the floor to Jan von Herf, please, who has a question? Natalie, could you ask if he can come in and ask the question himself? Jan? Would you like to ask the question?
Jan, you have the floor. You just have, we can hear you.
Unstable connection. Let me go back to his, oh yes, his question. Okay, the question he had was, I think actually Sunil, you could also perhaps answer it. He was saying, how do strategies like self-reliant India, or also the strategy of SAARC, how does that work in the regional, inter-regional context? Does it make fostering closer cooperation easier or even more difficult? So Sunil, you must have been, if you can come in now and maybe respond to that. I can also turn to Pascaline, of course, who follows these things. Sunil, can you answer that question? Maybe Pascaline, you can kick off with a response while Sunil reconnects. Yeah. Can you unmute Pascaline? Yes. Yeah. No. Okay. Can you unmute Pascaline, please, Natalie?
I'm trying, but when I'm unmuting her, she's muting herself. So
okay.
The
Pascaline,
power
don't
is
move.
yours, Pascaline. You just have to unmute yourself now.
Ah, okay. Yes, I think we're both pressing on the same.
That's right. Yeah.
At the same time. So, what was the question? It was about.
What about the self-reliant India, and then how I mean, if every country is on its own self-reliant and path in terms of looking after its own national interests, something that Ambassador Mashfee talked about as well. I mean, is that conducive to? And in Pakistan's doing the same thing, Bangladesh. Is that conducive to cross-border cooperation, intra-regional cooperation?
No, I don't think so. But I think you can say something and act in a different way. It's obvious that in the region, India is trying to partner. I mean, you gave the example, for example, of the COVID-19 emergency fund. That was an initiative of India. Now, of course, it ran into some problems. When there was talk on how this emergency fund would be administered, with India saying what each country is going to do their own thing there, and we're not going to control it at all. And then Pakistan objecting to the fact that actually there was some kind of a unit in the Indian Ministry of External Affairs handling this. And then it got a bit ugly, dashing my hopes, because I really thought that was the revival of SAARC right there. I think India has been trying to reach out to partners, and if it doesn't work with SAARC, it's trying to reach out to other partners. But it's not just limited to its own region, it's going all the way to ASEAN, it's going to the EU. That's just the thing. I think India feels a bit limited in its own region in South Asia because of some of the conflicts and so on. But it's not just India, it's other countries in South Asia having their own alliances. So Pakistan has its own preferences, preferred frameworks. And so, so that complicates things. Right. But no, self-reliance, I don't think it's true, really.
No country in today's world can be self-reliant. And as you say, the outreach that all the countries in the region, including India, are making towards other institutions, other organizations, and other governments is a sign that people do believe in globalization, whether they may articulate it differently in today's challenging environment. Sunil, I would really like you to come in because we're coming towards the end of our conference. I have a question coming in from Mr. Singh, Suhasini Singh. I wonder if, Suhasini, you can actually join yourself and ask the question. Otherwise, it's about, yes, if you can. Otherwise, it's about trade agreements with EU countries in South Asia. And is there a possibility, Ioannis, for you of having a regional agreement between the EU and South Asia on trade? I think we're not there yet, but I leave you to answer it.
First of all, to have an agreement, we have to have somebody who is mandated for that. So, to start with. So in reality, as we start now, we also plan to have, as part also of our roadmap towards 2035, with our strategic partnership with India, we explore the possibilities to see how we can really advance on the trade area. In fact, it's in a few days, actually, the day after tomorrow, where I think that we have a high-level meeting to dialogue to see on where we stand on the trade agenda. And when I say trade agenda, I'm also talking about investment agenda. So this is, and I cannot say much, but the hopes are there. There is a determination, I think, from both sides to find an agreement to see how we can really progress.
After 12 years.
But I cannot say anything. Whatever I can say, it remains to be seen. But certainly there is a goodwill from both sides. And in fact, we appreciate the benefits of an agreement. And also I think that it is something that certainly will stay on the agenda. There is no doubt about that. But of course, it is not an easy part. particularly with a partner with the same economy of the size like India and also from the European Union. So yes, on the bilateral side, and of course, in terms of regional integration, I think that there is no comparison of South Asia with, for example, ASEAN in connection with this type of partnership. So South Asia is far. I will stop here because the question was only on the trade.
No, but exactly. And even with ASEAN, as we all know, the arrangements, the agreements that are being signed with Vietnam, Singapore, and that are being negotiated with Indonesia and Malaysia are bilateral. The region-to-region deal is still there as an ambition, as a goal to be followed, but it's very difficult to put into action. I have Ambassador Mahbub Saleh of Bangladesh here as one of the as a participant. And I was wondering, Ambassador Mahbub, would you like to come in? Because I'm having difficulty connecting with Sunil. And I wanted a voice from the region, and your wonderful Joint Secretary has had to leave. So Ambassador Mahbub, if you can connect, I wouldn't mind having a quick intervention from yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Mashfee is a secretary. Secretary East, not a
Joint Secretary East, yes.
No, Secretary East. So
okay, Secretary East. Okay, sorry, I'm not a bureaucrat. I tend to get lost in in terms. Anyway, Ambassador, you are the ambassador. Go ahead.
No, thank you. Just a couple of points. Of course, EU's engagement with SAARC is always welcome. But I think in the new reality that we all are witnessing in the region. And with the new approach of Indo-Pacific and different countries, and of course EU is also considering its own Indo-Pacific strategy, perhaps it would be a good idea to engage with BIMSTEC as the prime regional organization there for engagement, a fruitful or effective engagement. We have seen SAARC for nearly 36 years. I think we all know what was the expectation and what has been achieved. So from that perspective also, I think the Bay of Bengal region, if you could visualize that as a region, the countries in and around that are members of BIMSTEC, and also those countries would fit into your views, thoughts, ideas, and strategies when you formulate the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy. Because the free and open Indo-Pacific vision, I can speak for Bangladesh very clearly, that from the highest political level, our narrative is very clear. We believe in a free, open, inclusive, peaceful, and secure Indo-Pacific with shared prosperity for all. So that is perhaps a pretty open sort of narrative, and which can certainly fit into the EU's thoughts and ideas, and we can have great cooperations, and BIMSTEC would fit into that pretty well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahbub. We're coming to the end of our conversation, and I just want to say whether, Pascaline, you have to leave as well, if you want to have a final word, and then I'll give a quick minute to Ioannis as well. Just quick word from you. Sunil, okay. If you can come in, that would be very nice, but you'll have to make the effort now. Yes.
Okay, so I would give a number of recommendations. The first one would be to foster better mutual knowledge of one another, so to give attention to the mutual perceptions, to foster better mutual understanding of the local context. Try to understand to what extent the priorities in South Asia match the European priorities. And a specific recommendation of mine to the EU would be to continue funding perception studies, because they're very, very useful, I think. but also perhaps studies that look into the historical development of regional organization in South Asia and beyond, and the interrelationship between these, so we understand the local concepts better. Continue the think tank training initiatives in Delhi and maybe extend it, because that's a way to have partners, from both South Asia, and Europe work together. I think this is really excellent. Rely more on delegations for local knowledge, I would say, and certainly focus on specific fields of mutual interest and expertise. We cannot do everything, so it's a good idea to focus on specific fields. I would continue the cooperation at primary and secondary school levels, including the attention to girls' education. I would also recommend more partnership between universities in South Asia and between EU and South Asian universities. I really like the South Asian University and what it has achieved, actually. Maybe because I'm in the College of Europe here, so of course it's kind of kindred spirit. And I would give attention to health, the environment, climate change challenges, food security, and how these challenges are interlinked, actually, as demonstrated by the current health crisis. But most of all, I think what you need is mutual respect between South Asia and European partners. And on this basis, I think we can achieve much.
Thank you very much, Pascaline. Thank you also for the wise counsel, if I may say so. Very good advice. Ioannis, your final word.
Thank you. Just to mention to you that the European Union always favors the partnership with international organizations, regional organizations, because we see them as a vehicle for regional integration, also solution of problems and conflicts, etc. And I think we have a lot of paradigms for that. Our experience is a bit mixed sometimes, because we see that in certain cases there is not much result at the end of the day, because what we seek as part of this support is through organizations, not to support the organizations themselves. So there is a bit of a difference there. And let's face it, and to be frank, I think that every regional organization is as strong as its member states wish it to be. And we cannot force the member states to make an organization stronger if they don't wish to do it. They can see the benefits on the other hand, and this is what we try to demonstrate. And I think that there is a lot of room to demonstrate benefits in South Asia. And I look forward to see how we can really design our program in the years to come with the support of delegations who also, I would like to reassure you, outreach all members of civil society in every single country. They've done it. If they've done it already, they will certainly do it. In order exactly to see how can really address this part of the regional integration and agenda. So certainly the focus is on the national, but we know that the interdependencies are there, the needs are there, and I would like to see how can really also from other hat also on the regional side, how we can really be more meaningful and more impactful on this front. Thank you.
Thank you, Ioannis. Sunil is back. Sunil, it's wonderful to see you now. Your final word, please.
Yeah, thank you, Shada. I would like to say two things. One of the things is Europe and EU and the SAARC has somehow there has been the gap between European Union and the SAARC association. So what I feel is that there has to be the annual dialogue between European Union and SAARC, so that there could be the SAARC European Union this track one dialogue can be initiated to bring the the two regional entities together in days to come, and that could be the biennial event that could have a very larger meaning, and that can bring all of the governments from Europe and from South Asia together. And the second thing is what I feel is there has been somehow the European banks and some of the European investors, they have been coming to Nepal slowly for the investments, basically in the energy sectors. And European Union is also.
We have a bad connection again, Sunil. But I think, thank you very much for that intervention and for your final words. Yes.
Prime investor who invested kilometer transmission line in Nepal, which I went of Nepal.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. Pascaline had to leave. Let me just thank you all for joining us, the participants as well as the panelists, Ioannis and Sunil and Pascaline and Madame Mashfee, who had to leave. You know, let me just round up very, very quickly in a minute. We say often, don't we, that it takes two to tango. And in this case, of course, there is a difficulty to tango together, but sometimes maybe we have to force people onto the dance floor. I have done so myself in several occasions. So I think perhaps that is an approach that we could take, is to find the functional cooperation as a start, as a stepping point. We've talked about a region that is very complicated and very complex, but also a region which is very resilient, with a very strong middle class, which is perhaps affected by the pandemic, but which is very resilient. We've also talked about the need to focus on cooperation in climate change, connectivity, education, and the global economic recovery, global supply chains, the difficulty of changing mindsets, but also the need to change mindsets so we can actually have an Indo-Pacific strategy, which does not ignore or sideline all of South Asia. Two suggestions. One that Pascaline has made, I think Ioannis is a very good one, is also of perhaps taking this kind of conversation forward in more think tank initiatives, which are not just about dealing with India, Pakistan, or Bangladesh or Nepal separately, but encouraging people to come forward like we did, Sunil, you and I, and EPC and AIDIA, to talk about certain things as a stepping stone towards real cooperation. And finally, a very, let's say, ambitious thought I had was we have an envoy at the European Union level for different regions, for ASEAN, for Central Asia, Africa, the Great Lakes area, et cetera, et cetera. I know that envoys are no longer in fashion, but perhaps we need to have someone at the External Action Service looking, like you do, Ioannis, at South Asia, but making that very proactive in terms of actually engaging interactively with South Asia and the different organizations, not just SAARC, but perhaps all the others we've talked about as well. So with that thought, I'd like to leave all of you. I'd like to thank you all again for joining us. I hope you enjoyed and learned from this conversation just as much as I did. Sunil, thank you for your cooperation, and see you all very soon at another EPC event. Bye-bye.